it's becoming normal now to criticize the government outside. I mean, people realize now that they are doing a really bad managing of all the everything, the economics, the healthcare system. And it's becoming more. I mean, we are not criticizing anymore the revolution that was something untouchable, and it was something that was in un pedestal, something that was like really high, and it was. Now we can talk about the government right now because they aren't doing their job.
Nicholas Brennan. I'm gonna say it like with a Spanish accent, Nicholas. I'm making you like an honorary Latino.
Nicky.
Okay, Nicholas Brennan, and the cinematographer producer Javier Labrador. Hola, Javi. Javi, tú eres cubano?
Yes.
Awesome. And Nicholas, just out of curiosity, what's your background?
No, American. Awesome. I'm in London. I'm in London for whatever reason now, but American from New York.
Well, guys, I'm Cuban American. I was born in Miami. I was able to visit the island several years ago for the first time, and so this story is close to my heart. I also was a heavy metal fan as a kid, and I didn't know about Zeus. So first of all, the documentary Los Últimos Frikis, which is basically slang for the last freaks, which is what they used to call rock and rollers and metalheads back in Cuba back in the day. What's resounding about this documentary that it's about a heavy metal band that it was illegal to play rock and roll or heavy metal in Cuba when they formed, and then they kind of had to go through a lot of challenges that we'll get through. So to give me a little bit of a background as to why you guys decided to make this documentary in the first place, and we'll get into some of the details.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll start, Javi, with what drew me to the story, and then I think, Javi, I think you can chime in with what drew you to the story, because I think ultimately the final film, while it was about 10 years of filmmaking from the start, I initially went to Cuba as a young student in college. And I was really, as an American with no prior Cuban experience and had sort of just grown up with the idea of Cuba as this very different, isolated place that it was so far away yet so close. I made a trip down there and spent 3 months while still in school, and was really blown away by this discovery of a community that I felt quite at home with, discovering and going to my first Zeus show that a friend took me to in Havana at the Maxime Rock, and very much feeling transported back into a place where I grew up, the State Theater in Portland, Maine, and sort of seeing the flashing lights and hearing the great band on stage with super tight guitar and the sort of screaming madman on stage, and feeling, wow, this is so familiar. But also then looking around and seeing, the Che Guevara tattoos and the sort of Ministry of Interior looking guys at the door, and saying, what is this world that feels so similar, but also is obviously has a lot more depth and something else really going on below the surface. And I think that is the initial hook for me that over the course of about a decade, continuing to pull back layers, and ultimately what we see in the film Los Últimos Frikis is the story of this band and also the experience of really following them.
Yeah.
And I think what really makes the project special is the collaboration with Frikis like Javi.
Yeah. Javier, how did you get into it? Because I imagine that Nicholas, you couldn't be in Cuba over the course of the 10 years that you followed the band, so you were relying on Javi to be there recording over the 10 years. So Javier, how did you get into the scene and close to the band to do this documentary?
Well, I arrived in the project when Nicholas hadn't shot half of the film.
Yeah,
I guess we met because we were doing another job together. So we decided to go on this trip of recording Zeus and the band. Here's my kid. Say hello. So he's complaining because he cannot listen to his cartoons, but he's going out now. So the thing is that Nicholas told me that he was working on this project, and I was really amazed of what he had till that moment. But he came to Cuba because he was working in other projects. So I didn't record alone, but by myself, anything. He was always here while we were working, right? So in that period of the last 5 years of the end of the project, we come along, shooting and doing interviews and recording part of the tour that they had at that time. So yeah.
Javier, are you in Cuba now?
I'm in Cuba now. Yeah.
Where do you live, in Havana?
I live in Havana. I just came back after 2 years of living in Miami. I moved to Miami 2 years ago, and this is my first trip since I left.
Are you living in Cuba or you're just visiting?
I'm visiting now.
Okay.
Well, I didn't. Times have changed a lot in Cuba. Now you can leave, but you don't need to leave definitely. So we, as Cubans, we're allowed to come back. Okay. We don't lose our national citizenship. Yeah. Okay. If we can come back before 2 years.
I have to ask, just because, and I know it's touchy, just knowing that you're in Cuba now, but maybe because you're visiting, you can speak a little freer. We can get into the fact that this band, it was illegal for the band to even play the music early on, and then later on, the Ministry of Culture kind of got behind them and allowed them to play. But did you encounter any difficulty shooting this documentary? Did they, kind of like make it, challenging for you to shoot whatever? Were they like, is it okay for you to come in and out, and them knowing that you shot a documentary that touches upon some history that might be touchy to the government?
You can answer that.
Yeah, we both could answer. I think one of the things that was really special about, and the importance of working, Javi and I together, as well as other members of the team, was finding a way to tell a story that allowed us to speak to what the band calls the forbidden truth, and it lets an audience watch the film and come away with the understanding of the forbidden truth in Cuba and what it means to live with that. But also, in a way, the band is not what one would describe as a dissident band. They very much want to maintain their position and their ability to keep playing music and to stay relatively non-political and to try to avoid some of those conversations. And I think that was a constant push and pull between me as an outsider trying to understand, Javi as someone from the island who understands what's really, some of the sort of deeper nuances, as well as the band. So basically, it's a push and pull between what the band was able to say and what we were able to really see. And I think that was the central struggle of making the film, is making the film in a way that protected the band and their ability to continue making music in Cuba,
So you guys were dealing with the Ministry of Culture throughout the production, I'm assuming. They were aware of the production, no?
They were aware of the making of the film, but I think I would say in Cuba, a lot of it comes down to self-censorship. And I think people having a sense of what they can and can't say. But Javi, what do you think of that?
Well, of course, they knew that we were shooting the film. You know, this is a very controlled island, and the constant traveling of Nick in Cuba, they knew that we were doing something. We didn't get an official permits to shoot because also we were a crew that was just the two of us, or maybe sometimes a third person doing sound, or a fourth one doing production, or a driver. But they knew that we were doing something, but I think that they let them, you know, they as Nick say, you know, they know what they have to say, and they know the band, they are being related with the Ministry of Culture and their agency of rock for so long that they already know what they are gonna say. But I think that they gave us some very special interviews and comments, and you can see it in the film, right? Those sequences where they gave us that forbidden truths, that those things that lays beneath the surface, right?
I think maybe the story that sums it all up in terms of, because for me, part of the reason that I was always so interested in this film, what got me coming back was understanding what it was like as an artist, and for these musicians making music in Cuba like this, was trying to understand what they were up against. And I think what was always the band's biggest fear was that this film would come out and that they would face consequences for it. And I think what ended up happening, we had the privilege of screening the film in New York. We premiered in New York, but then we also had a screening in Havana. And the night before our Havana premiere, the lead singer was called in and had to screen the film for some sort of official censor types. And he had to sit there with, you know, you can imagine a bureau, like just a bureau of bureaucrats with a DVD freaking thing in their hand, remote control, pressing play. You know, you can imagine just with the picture, you can just imagine, you know, if you were making the film as a scene, you put cigar smoke in it and just dance some, you know, guy with some military lapels, presses play on the film, and Dion's sitting there. And the first line of the film is, they hated us because we were different. According to, you know, guy presses pause on the film and turns to the lead singer and says, "Yes, okay."
What do you mean with?
Yeah, what is this?
Explícate.
Explícate. And the lead singer had to watch the film that Javi and I made and our team made, and he had to defend every line in the film that was said. And that was, I think, always in Dion's head. He always knew that was going to happen. And I think for me, I didn't. You know, I was like, "Well, what's the worst? You know, what? You know, come on, Dion, give us more. Come on, tell us the story." And I think part of this was also Dion giving us the time and space to learn ourselves in a way that allowed us to tell the story in a more creative and artistic way, instead of just beating everybody over the head with the same, you know, crap we've all heard. And I think that was ultimately, I think, the compromise, but also the very real cost that Dion knew that he would end up facing.
Well, I mean, I think you guys did a really good job of it. I mean, like you said, the band is not a political band. They're a heavy metal band. They're talking about just, you know, personal freedom, personal independence. But, you know, as you've learned, you know, since you first visited Cuba, anything that has to do with Cuba innately becomes political, even if you're trying not to make it political. But I think that you guys were able to, I think anybody, regardless of where they lie on the spectrum, can watch this film and feel like you guys definitely walk the fine line, because, you know, some of the issues that they do have to deal with when it comes to both government censorship and self-censorship. Sometimes they over self-censor because they're afraid, of what might happen. That's shown in the film. And I'm actually surprised at how much Dione, the lead singer Dione, I'd say, says in the film. And so you guys did, leave a lot in there. So with Dione, who's an amazing character, he actually went to jail for 6 years in the early 90s, right? Because he was playing this. So talking about how he's not trying to be political, but just it becomes innately political. He went to jail for 6 years for playing this music and then he found.
It's quite the sort of him, and he's never really enjoyed talking about his. That was always the sort of hardest thing to talk about. And I imagine both on a personal level. I mean, Dione spent the prime of his life, really, his 20s, during this period of the special period from the early 90s up to the late 90s, 6 years, basically 1990 to 1996. And you can imagine in prison up through his mid and late 20s. So he's always, as a personal level, an incredibly difficult time for him, but also getting to the heart of what his time in prison, what the result of the time in prison was, I think was quite complicated. And also partially as a result of, him also being involved in various different things that rock and roll freakies are involved with. But also as a result that often, I think the justice system, you're often not necessarily arrested or reprimanded or face repercussions for the specific issue that you're causing. Often there's other excuses for you to run into trouble.
Well, I think it's a big accomplishment that they ultimately got sanctioned by the Ministry of Culture, because it's rare that a Cuban agency will kind of admit, hey, the way we thought about you before is not the way we think about you now. So to me, it is. I'm not one of these absolutists. I can see some sort of positivity and a little bit more leeway happening, which is a good thing. And music and culture is always the way to lead that. Javier, as someone who was there with them, especially more recently, how does what's the mentality of the band now? Do they feel more vindicated? I saw, I definitely see pride in them in this documentary. They definitely, they know that they've made an impact and that they've paid their dues in many ways that most rock bands around the world would not have to. So how do you see the mental and emotional state of the band towards the end of when you were filming?
You can see it while they are touring. They have been in the end, at the end of the island in Guantanamo, which is the east far of Cuba, right? And then they met their fans there. They feel that they are what they are. They are really important for these people. They have been playing for 30 years. Man, you can imagine that, being a band, being together for so long, and yeah, well, they finally made it to they record a couple of albums paid by the Minister of Culture, and they got some kind of recognition in that way. And also, well, Dione has become now the director of the rock agency, so he got some recognition of what they have been doing for so long, and they are planning to record a new album, also produced by the Minister of Culture and the rock agency from Cuba. So they are happy with it. They are expecting to things to open for to this pandemic to end up and start playing again and getting on tour.
But you know what? It would make so much sense to me, a Cuban heavy metal band makes sense. Like I said, when I grew up in Miami, I grew up liking heavy metal. And there's actually, several Cuban Americans who are part of some of the biggest heavy metal bands. David Lombardo, who's the drummer of Slayer, scored this film. Al Jurgensen, who's the head of Ministry, I don't know if people realize he's also half Cuban. So Cubans have a lot of energy. So I would expect there to be like at least one good
as well.
Say that again, Nicholas?
I said Rudy Sarzo as well.
Rudy Sarzo as well, exactly. And there's just a lot of amplified energy. Maybe it's the coffee, the humidity, just the island. Cubans have a certain energy, so it's cool to see that them being a rock band. And just to me, the story of the band is that at a time, especially early, now we see that they're able to do what they want to do. And I think maybe that the Ministry of Culture in the 90s had a few younger agents who were fans, who then when they got to a position of power and influence in the government, they said, you know what, let's incorporate these rockers. But the fact that early on, they did something that could and did get them in trouble, to the point that they were called freaks, and they still played. To me, it's beyond politics. It's about, individuality and resilience and bravery, in the light of people not wanting you to be who exactly you want to be. That is so inspiring, because most people would not, most people will go ahead and just hide who they are to get along, right? But these guys, you can't hold them. You can't hold them back.
I think that's part of what, it's just rock and roll, man. I think ultimately what unites the Sex Pistols to Zeus, to people that, we've showed this film, the editor of the film is from Iran, and he connected with it because it reminded him and his wife of what it was like growing up in Tehran, listening to rock and roll. I think there's a lot that speaks really to the heart of what it means to rock, what is so great about rock and roll is, and particularly heavy metal, is the physical expression of just, being pissed off and wanting to just shout. And I think that ultimately is true in Cuba as it is around the world. And I think it's hopefully something a lot of people could take, not only the Cuba story, but also just a story of these artists in general.
Listen, rock and roll was the counter. It was the beginning of what we would call the counterculture, and very revolutionary. And even when you don't want it to be political, it just kind of has that core of this rebellion, right? So it's very interesting. I really enjoy the film, and people can watch it anywhere, right? Where's it going to be, on Apple TV?
So it'll be on Topic, the streaming platform, as well as on in the US and in Canada, all the sort of usual platforms. It'll be on iTunes, Google, Amazon, Vimeo.
Before I let you guys go, a couple more things though. Where's the band now? In Cuba?
So the band is in Cuba, exactly.
Have you seen them lately?
Yeah. Yeah, I did an interview of Diony recently for the release on Topic, which is the platform that is going to have it. So I did an interview with him. I met him at the rock agency, and he answered a couple of questions. That's why I was telling you that he's very excited of his new project. And we were talking about him, about Diony, that he has been always a dreamer, right? Nick, he has been always dreaming, and actually he's a completely optimist. He's really optimistic about what's going to happen to him, to the band, even though that the country is in a terrible conditions right now. That's what I can tell you. But he's inspiring around him, and it was beautiful to meet him.
Javi, I'm going to ask you this, and again, I know how delicate the waters are, and especially that you're where you are and all that stuff. But I'd be remiss, from Cuban American to Cuban, and you being in Havana now, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask, what's it like on the streets? We know what happened this summer on the streets of Havana, in the streets here, in the United States with the Cuban American community. What's the state of things? Is it simmering down? Is it kind of like, was it a moment that kind of just came and left? Or is there still a little bit of, I'm impressed with your internet connection. So I'm assuming that people are able to read and send messages and all that stuff. I'm happy about that. But, and I know you might have to answer this carefully. I get it. But what's the emotional state of Havana, of the streets of Havana right now, after this tumultuous summer?
No, I think that everything is cooling down. Everything is cooling down. People are waiting to see what's going to happen next. I'm connected through a VPN. I have to use a VPN to go through. So somehow I'm connected to somewhere in the US. But the thing is that, I mean, there is a lot of scarcity, right? Scarcity.
Scarcity.
See, I mean, you can see the lines everywhere, and you can feel that people are like waiting for something to happen. And I feel that it's becoming normal now to criticize the government outside. I mean, people realize now that they are doing a really bad managing of all the everything, the economics, the healthcare system. And it's becoming more. I mean, we are not criticizing anymore the revolution that was something untouchable, and it was something that was in un pedestal, something that was like really high, and it was. Now we can talk about the government right now because they aren't doing their job. So if they can do it in the right way, we are allowed to protest. We are allowed to go outside and do una manifestación and have our own opinions of what they are doing. And you can tell that they don't really know how to manage the whole crisis that the country is in it right now. They start giving like gifts in la bodega. By every family, they gave like 2 or 3 bags of pasta, some rice, a couple of beans from Venezuela. I mean, a couple of bags of beans from Venezuela. And they are trying to keep everyone kind of happy with it, because people are facing a hard time with food, but I think that they are surviving. I don't think that they will last much on power. They will have to move something. They have been trying to open a bit of things, like people are now allowed to create some enterprise, but with a lot of restrictions. And anyway, as usual, the same things as they have been doing it. But right now, I mean, Fidel Castro is not there anymore, and Raúl is almost gone now. And this guy that appears on TV, it's not doing well, and people knows that.
To me, I actually find a lot of optimism in that, because I do see change happening and people being more liberated. And just to circle back to rock and roll, I mean, what's more liberating than rock and roll? And so to put a focus on a Cuban band like Zeus and what they've been through, I think it's the ultimate rock and roll story, right, Nicholas?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you'll see Zeus continuing to scream and shout for I would say, if you ask these guys, a common question, hey, what do you feel for your 30th anniversary? What happens? And what happens next? And they say, oh, well, we're going to get ready to celebrate our 35th and then our 40th. And then our 35th. But I think more importantly, it's not only Zeus, it's also all the other bands. I think that was something we had a conversation with Diony or Javier, and then I listened to it afterwards. The conversation with the lead singer Diony a couple of days ago. Diony also talking about the next generation that's growing, and I think the importance of the voices of a new generation, a new generation of frikis. We called the film Los Últimos Frikis, pero la pregunta es, ¿y de qué los próximos?
Los próximos frikis. Love it. Guys, I can't thank you enough for making this documentary. I've been showing it to friends here, rock friends here. And like I said, I went to Cuba a few years ago. I'd like to go, hopefully, again soon. And we're just watching the streets of Havana. It means a lot to me, and it was so well done. And Javi, thank you for being on the island, finishing. And Nicholas, thank you for going to Cuba and seeing what a special story it is and bringing it to people. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It's a great film.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, guys.
Share it around.
Yes.
We will.